Are you more often sad than happy in your marriage? Are you tired of the conflict, stress, and the heartache? Have you exhausted the catchphrase, marriage is supposed to make you holy, not happy? Do you want to get off the rewarded cycle because you've discovered that after spinning your wheels for years inside of that cliche, you feel more unloved and lonely than ever? Have you emotionally flatlined and you're ready to give up in spite of counseling and having read all the books on being the most excellent wife that you can be? After all these years, you understand what marriage is supposed to look like, yet there's just more isolation and disconnection. If that sounds like your marriage, you've come to the right spot. Hi there, my name is Lillian, and here I talk about God and the femininity that He created you with, and how that femininity can heal you, give you back your life, and possibly the marriage you've always hoped for. There's a caveat though. As you grow and your femininity shines brighter and you get stronger in the Lord, a true believing brother will love who you're becoming. But a wolf in sheep's clothing will hate your new sense of self. As God regenerates your heart to be the daughter that He always meant for you to be, the wolf will make your marriage worse. Isn't it frustrating when you read yet another marriage book or listen to another podcast or learn about a new undiscovered philosophy on marriage? It seems so right and you get your hopes up thinking, this is the one, this is what I'm missing. You read it and understand it, and you might even talk about it with your husband, and it seems to work for a brief time. Then it falls off the radar. Again. Not yours, His radar. It feels like another gut punch, doesn't it? Except for it's not on your body where it would leave a mark. It's in your heart and soul, where no one sees the tremendous amount of pain you experience right inside your own marriage. If this sounds too melodramatic for you, that might be a good thing. It means that you're probably married to a man who's a type 1 husband. Be thankful for that, because it's not too exaggerated for a woman who's married to either a type 2 husband or a type 3 man. If you don't know what kind of man you're married to, watch the video titled The 3 Types of Men You Could Have Married. Which one is yours? I've put a link in the description box. I know what it's like to want to have a great marriage, a relationship where you're deeply connected, one that feels like the two of you are creating something bigger than each one of you, where your differences are not only acceptable, but cherished and celebrated. One where your real, authentic, feminine self is seen as a valuable contribution. One where open communication is encouraged and your thoughts and expressions and requests can all be unfiltered. Yet, the harder you try, the more elusive that relationship becomes. Instead of connection, you experience emotional loneliness and mental distress. Communication usually ends up stalling out or heading into a fight, hardly ever reaching any kind of resolution in conflicts. Just by trying to explain yourself, you end up in a power struggle that you never intended to be in. I get it. I know exactly what you're experiencing. I lived it for over 30 years. And I read probably over, maybe 50 different books about Christian marriage, and none of them had long-lasting solutions. But that doesn't have to be your reality. You know, every single one of those marriage books and podcasts did the same thing. They all identified the right problems. There's a few hot button areas that are common to marriage. The way they identified them was saying it shouldn't be this way. Like, if this is happening in your marriage, it shouldn't be. Or if that's happening in your marriage, it shouldn't be. An example would be something like if your husband doesn't love you like his own body. Their solution was, well, he should. And then the counsel or advice breaks down why it was wrong for him to not do the right thing. Like, if he wasn't loving me the way he loved his own body, or he wasn't being the appropriate head in the marriage, or being financially responsible. Their counsel landed on one of two ways. The first one usually told me how to manipulate, that by maneuvering actionable ways to achieve the behavior I wanted. That's masculine thinking, the very opposite of femininity. And that was always the largest part of any of the marriage counsel I received or read about from Christians. It felt like they thought they were telling me something that I didn't already know, and that just by me understanding the rules and expectations better, that was going to change him into the things he should be doing. And then the second piece of advice kind of bleeds out of the first one. While you're doing the rules better, the rules that they just explained to you like you didn't understand them, those rules, while you're waiting for your husband to be more financially responsible or start loving you, you can consider your life sacrificial living for the Lord. This is the heartbreaking part for me, because it's still so prevalent in Christian marriage teaching. You, sister, are not the sacrifice in marriage. The head is. Ephesians 5:25. It brings me to tears because I'm hearing the same ineffective advice as I did for 30 years of marriage. It's not the solution. In fact, it's devastating for the feminine heart. And the most deadly part of the information is that both of those options are always presented as imperatives with a promise from Scripture. Their solutions encouraged me to get more deeply embedded in this painful cycle of hope and despair, desperately longing for a deeper connection. Yet, with every year and every new Christian teaching on marriage, I just became more disillusioned. The loneliness and isolation became more and more painful over the years. The repetitive Christian marriage counsel is what conditioned me to stay in a kind of learned helplessness. Their teaching stripped me of my feminine power and weakened my voice. But worse, it kept me naive and gullible because it locked me into a masculine mindset instead of helping me heal so that I could become the shrewd feminine creature that God designed me to be. I'm offering you a different way of looking at your marriage, a different solution. But it is scary and risky because it's new. Well, it's actually not really new. It's the original way God created us, but it's been strategically hidden underneath religious masculine mindsets and dogmatic teaching. It's risky because it asks you to trust God to take you into an unknown future, and that journey begins with you looking inside yourself. There's a quote by Anais Nin that talks about risk. She says that a day will come for you when the risk to remain tight in a bud will be more painful than the risk it will take to blossom. The pain that Anais Nin is talking about, that's the pain of change. My change started with a simple little word. I remember the moment so clearly when I said it. I remember exactly where I was standing. I heard my voice say, "I can't live like this anymore. I won't. I don't know what it means to my future, but I will not live the next 20 years in this marriage the way I've lived the last 32. And it happened so fluidly. That's how I know it was from God. Time sort of stops for me. You know what a deja vu feels like. All of a sudden, you're just in it. It maybe lasts for about, 5 or 10 seconds. Well, that's what it felt like, except for it lasted much longer, more like 20 to 30 seconds. Going from the word can't to the word won't was the beginning for me. Being willing to step from the pain because of living in it, into the pain and fear that accompanies the unknown. That's how I began to recover my voice of choice. If you're not prepared to leave the marriage, because for me, that wasn't an option, so I know what that's like. If the circumstances in your marriage don't change, yet they're too painful to stay in, and your husband won't change, the only person left to change is you. God did that by showing me my feminine voice that He created me with. But He left the choice up to me. He didn't force me to make it. It was more like I saw in my mind's eye, in that deja vu kind of stasis, I saw a fork in the road of my future. I chose to step off the road that told me I can't, onto the road that said, I will not live this way anymore. It was a metaphor that became clear in my mind and heart. Does God do that with any of you? He lays it out for you to see, and then He waits patiently for you to choose. And then suddenly, everything falls into place like dominoes. Getting your voice back changes you from having a victim mindset to embodying a powerful, feminine, victorious one. The unique feminine voice that you have, the one that was given to you by God, is as appealing to Him as your distinct fingerprint that He also chose for you. You, sister, have a choice to use that feminine voice. But you have to be willing to embrace the pain of change, and you have to be willing to risk seeing where your thought patterns could be wrong. You know what that means. God will change your worldview to His view, and He does it through paradigm shifts. You have to allow God to show you how you've been conditioned to think like a son instead of His daughter. He's creating a masterpiece of you. He says in Isaiah 43, He created you and formed you, and He's called you by name. You are His. And in Ephesians 2, you are His workmanship, His masterpiece. He's recreating your feminine heart in Christ Jesus so that you can do the good things He planned for you long ago. That's called sanctification. He's not going to create you as a female creature, then plan for you to live life as a masculine one, thinking like a man, especially when it comes to a one-flesh relationship. He put all the colors He would need for the masterpiece that's you. He put them all inside you. Every single one of those colors featured as your femininity. They're already there. Colors that are specific to your individual personality, skills, and talents. But somehow, some way, us girls, we get conditioned to live through a two-dimensional color scheme that's black and white. Black and white thinking is how a son of God thinks, not a daughter. If you've got a masculine mindset, black and white are the only two colors that you can see, because they've been systematically layered over top of all your true feminine colors that God put on His palette to use for you. You are a multi-dimensional creature with a full spectrum of color. And the only way to let your true colors of your feminine mind and heart to emerge is to strengthen them through healing and embodiment. It's my hope that this next question, I only wanted to put one in this video because it's a big one. It's my hope that this question and the 4 previous ones in part 1 will serve as a gentle probing into your deepest and the most private thought processes. And by reflecting on your current mindsets and habits and honestly assessing between you and God how they align with the high percentage of estrogen that He chose to put inside your body, I'm hoping you'll be able to tell if your thought processes are driven by a masculine mindset. Let's start. Question 5. Do I lean into the outer woman? You capitalize more on the outward aspects of being a woman, yet you don't feel more feminine on the inside. In the beginning, it's a struggle to understand the difference between doing your thinking in a masculine mindset and becoming aware of all your emotions and feelings found in your feminine features. It's really hard to understand how to shift from that aggressive, goal-oriented mindset that's driven by testosterone to embodying a vulnerable receptivity that's soft, warm, and gentle. Most of us have been up in our heads for so long in that masculine linear way of thinking that it just feels like home to operate there. Like those black and white colors have been leaking down into our own individual colors as if they belong over top of us. You can't see where the masculine ends and the feminine begins, making it nearly impossible to fully and authentically integrate all the feminine features that God created inside your body. Plus, there's that unknown factor again. Just because something is familiar doesn't make it right. When you've never embodied the emotional depth of those feminine features, even though it's the right way for you to live in relationship, it feels scary. That's tough on us girls. Fear is an ever-present state for us outside of Eden. It's why God tells his sons that we are the weaker vessels. Fear is the Achilles heel for a female. This struggle to learn and the fear that goes along with the unknown is what drives a huge temptation to act feminine instead of actually seeing our brokenness, healing those wounds, strengthening and trusting God. I think that's normal. It's not right, but it's normal for us females. Well, all humans, but I'm speaking to my sisters. It's normal for us to want to choose a different, less scary, less painful way instead of doing the work of growing in faith and in him and learning to trust the femininity that he gave us. Look at our ancestors. They did not want to do the work that was required to trust God in the unknown wilderness. They just wanted to go back to Egypt because it seemed easier, less work, less messy, less scary. That's because being in captivity had become so familiar to them. I know what that's like. Remember earlier when I said I couldn't leave the marriage? That's part of it. You stay in worse conditions. You stay in a highly conflicted marriage where there's no peace and your femininity is roughly handled and abused because the unknown is just too unknown. I've described it as living with a shark. You convince yourself that you're safe as long as you can see the fin. It's when the fin goes under the water that it becomes terrifying. That feeling, if you can imagine it, that's what the unknown feels like to a woman. But that's what faith is, stepping into the unknown. That's what God was asking the Israelites to do. And it's what he asked me to do when he showed me that fork in my road. And it's what he's asking you to do. Faith is not faith without the unknown. There's nothing courageous or victorious about knowing the outcome. When I began the journey of healing my feminine heart, it wasn't in embracing the internal and negating external attributes. The external ones matter, of course they do. We're women. We like to look good and smell good. It's how we are. But I had gotten the priority and purpose all messed up, kind of. I'm talking about 1 Peter 3, verses 3 and 4. Don't let your beauty consist of outward things like elaborate hairstyles and wearing gold jewelry or fine clothes, but rather what's inside the heart, the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. The outward isn't the beginning. How you look on the outside isn't the right priority. It matters, but not in the way we think it does. I know it sounds like such a cliche to say it's what's on the inside that counts, because it is a cliche, and that's what makes it so confusing, because it's not truth. And our feminine heart, deep inside, knows it's not true. What I'm driving at is the dichotomy that females embody. and how blinded we get when we're convinced our experience is not true. In those verses from 1 Peter 3, the religious masculine interpretation says that the external doesn't matter, only the heart matters. But inside our heart, the heart of a woman, lives our feminine essence. Our inner woman is full of emotions and feelings, yet we're told they don't matter. What's inside matters. Do you see the contradiction in that statement? It makes no sense. What's inside matters more, except for the truth of what's inside a woman's heart? So we hide and push down the truth that we know fills our own hearts, and we allow masculine thinking to completely take over by covering the very features that separate a woman from a man. And we end up doing masculinity instead of embodying femininity. But then, to add insult to religious injury, in Deuteronomy 22:5, God tells us explicitly that the external does matter a lot. He says that he finds it disgusting when a female doesn't distinguish herself from maleness in her outward presentation. Healthy masculinity is looking for true femininity, but it finds Pornhub and OnlyFans instead, because brothers don't know what real femininity is or what it looks like. The truth is that it doesn't matter if a man is a believer or not. He doesn't lose his masculine preference of choosing a mate because he becomes a Christian. He doesn't get a lobotomy, nor does God titrate the testosterone out of his body. The truth is that outward presentation does matter to men. We've got to stop believing the lie that looks don't matter. They absolutely do. We've been gaslighting ourselves and each other with two opposing views. On one hand, it's completely obvious that looks do matter. A cursory view of spending habits in the retail world tell us that. But at the same time, we hear a message that external looks shouldn't matter and what's on the outside is irrelevant because it's what's on the inside that matters. Whether you want to ignore it or admit it, the truth is that a woman is still valued mostly by what she looks like. I'm not talking about whether it's right or wrong. It's just the way society is. The extreme obsessive money and energy that we're putting into all the body positive campaigns that say, oh, it's what's on the inside that matters, not on the outside. We end up believing it, and we're tricked into thinking it's true. And that it makes you a bad person if you put any emphasis on your external appearance. Women get stigmatized if they put any priority on physical attractiveness. We're talking the talk of inner beauty, while at the same time glorifying outer beauty. It's like constantly being at war with yourself inside your own soul. The masculine Christian perspective prides itself the same way, except for in Christendom, we use words like modesty and piety, but their outcome and purpose is the same. It kills off the femininity in the heart and soul of a woman. Other religions do it to a greater degree by demanding that a woman completely cover and hide everything that's womanly about herself. This is a more direct and overt method of killing off the power of femininity. They start from the outside, and then it slowly works toward the inside. The body positive effort from the world and the piety and modesty from the religious masculine mindset. I mean, first of all, anytime the world and Christianity are conceptually aligned, it's suspicious. But the fact that both of these efforts are so loud and pushed with gusto suggests just how real and pervasive this value of external appearance is when it comes to women. So, what does it mean for us? It means that without healing and understanding true godly femininity, the majority of women spend their entire lives grappling with body insecurity and questioning their worth. Christianity perpetuates the false narrative exactly like the world and those other religions do. In a way, it's almost worse because all of the hiding of our true feminine features, we drive all that down deep inside of us so that the truth is well hidden, lest anyone see the truth of who we really are. And that's what makes 1 Peter 3, verses 3 through 4 so confusing. It's the masculine interpretation that's linear. It's black and white thinking. And when it comes to the scriptures, what we're seeing is that it can't hold space for both ways of thinking. Not as long as it's ignorant of the physiology of a female body and it lacks the knowledge of the polarities of masculine and feminine and how they energetically fit with each other. But here's the cool thing. A woman does have the capacity to hold both inside her. The internal and external both matter to us. That's why the dichotomy makes perfect sense to us. We can feel the reality of it inside us, but only if we're healed. It's the masculine view. Notice I'm not saying men. I don't blame men for this. A woman has a choice to course correct and to heal and to stop thinking like a man. So it's the masculine view that forces a woman to choose the internal or the external, when she shouldn't be choosing either, but embodying one and choosing the other at the same time. So we choose wrong for the feminine heart that lives inside us, and we end up focusing on the outer look, and we think that makes us more womanly, more feminine, because we look the part. Yet on the inside, we're still striving in our masculine energy because we're thinking like men. What you're being told about yourself is not the reality that you feel deep inside your heart. I remember coming home from the salon one day. My hair had been done and I'd got my nails done and I'd bought a new outfit and I had changed into it before going out, and I looked in the mirror and felt ugly. I thought, what is wrong with me? There's nothing more I can do for myself. Why do I feel so dull and not sparkly, so not pretty, so not feminine? And that was the first time I had uttered that word, feminine. And the Lord revealed it to me, because you're not feminine, you're masculine. You capitalize on the outside so you don't have to look at the inside. The reason I felt so ugly and even bad, yes, I felt like I wasn't a good person, is because that's what I had been conditioned to feel ever since I was a little girl. That any of my real feelings were just wrong and bad. Now, during that experience with God, when I was looking in the mirror, I hadn't heard his voice. It was just, that knowing of knowledge. The knowledge that I wasn't feminine because I was masculine, and my worst fears were being exposed. I was a bad person. But then I heard his voice, and it felt like I was being rescued from my own thoughts about myself. He said, "You're not bad, you're broken." It was a hard experience to accept the truth of the mental gymnastics that I was doing in order to hide the emotional train wreck inside my heart. But when you make the realization about yourself, it's a good thing, because you can't change what you can't see. And in order to heal what's broken, the Lord has to show you where and how he's going to heal you. That's the terrifying part of the healing journey. Seeing the truth of just how brokenhearted you are. I maximized on the outside as a woman to try and minimize the inside because I hadn't been taught the truth about having a broken heart. I had only ever been taught that I was bad on the inside. And you know what? Christianity teaches the same thing. When we're taught about sanctification and growing in faith, it's exclusively presented from the perspective of you being the sinner. You're the one who's always doing the sin, the one who's bad, the one who's the evil one. You know what's missing? Sometimes you're not the sinner. Sometimes you're the one who's received the sin. Sometimes you're the bruised or the broken-hearted one that needs to heal first. Healing's part of the sanctification process that's completely overlooked. We've been told that it's all about forgiveness. That's a lie. Forgiveness has nothing to do with healing. Forgiveness is in the present. Healing is from the breakage to your soul that's been done to you in the past. Healing is important for men too, but it's detrimental to us women because our emotions are our primary operating system. And this is one of the reasons God says we are the weaker vessels. Childhood heartbreak or bruising affects a female much different than a male. The wrong that was done to me in the past was that even though God created me as a little girl, in our house I was raised in a masculine mindset, doing the right thing, saying the right words, accomplishing appropriately, striving to do more and more is how I got rewarded with relationship attention and connection. Do good to get good. As I grew up and entered into the world, school and work, both follow that same masculine perspective for women. You'll get further ahead if you think competitively and have more accomplishments. Then, when I was born again and started going to church, the model for acceptance at church is like the model that's in the world. Be busy, function hard, empty yourself into commitments and lots of activities. My inner girl had never been nurtured, cherished, celebrated, or even acknowledged that she existed. Looking back, the worst part of the blindness to my femininity was Christian churches. I think it's the worst because instead of teaching the truth about womanhood, it validated the masculine mindset, which was from the world. If that's the boat you find yourself in, the solution is to feel your feels. If you were raised to think like a boy instead of a little girl, your emotions feel like a foreigner inside you. You feel almost like they betray you. When you want to squeal in delight or cry in emotional pain, you feel a shame inside yourself and you push them down instead of accepting them as your authentic self. Let that inner little girl out. Let her surface and get to know her. The feminine interpretation of Psalm 139, 13 through 16 gives you permission to authenticate all those juicy, girly emotions by expressing them through your feelings. In order to reframe your approach towards sanctification and spiritual growth within the context of femininity, you've got to honor the reality of the distinct feminine features that God created within his daughters. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. A, accept the gift of your feminine heart. Take to heart your feminine essence and understand that your true strength lies in agreeing with your femininity rather than rejecting it by conforming to the world's idea of womanhood or religious expectations rooted in a masculine mindset. Recognize that God created you with inherent qualities and strengths that are not just exclusive to femininity, but also unique to your own personality. There was a time and space when it was just you and God, and you were who you were meant to be. That's the inner girl you want to find, the one who God created, the original you. Letter B, embrace vulnerability and healing. Allow yourself to be vulnerable with God as he shows you your emotional triggers. Those are your broken spots. Trust him as you allow the negative emotions that come with emotional pain. understand that healing and spiritual growth are inextricably linked for your feminine heart, and that healing will only happen with authentic confrontation. God doesn't work in the arena of false dichotomies where you mask pain with busy work, especially if that means throwing yourself into religious activities and tasks instead of spending time in reflection with Him. You want Him to show you where your heart and soul need to be healed and reconstructed for sanctification. Number C, cultivate self-compassion and self-care. Practice self-compassion by treating yourself with kindness, understanding, and acceptance. That means accept that little girl inside you. Do kindness to her by letting her come out and be exposed instead of hiding her. Let all of her come to the surface by understanding all of her, including all those bruised up and broken-hearted bits inside of her. You feel unput together, kind of fragmented, like 2 or 3 or 4 different women, because unhealed, you are multiple different kinds of women. And on the outside, you look like an adult female, but you don't feel like that on the inside. This idea of self-care and self-compassion comes from the Shema, the prayer that's recited daily by the Jews. Love Adonai with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Can you recite it religiously without all your heart, mind, and soul and strength? Of course you can. And that's what Satan wants you to do. Stay in the shallows. But God wants the Shema to be a constant reminder of the depth within yourself and how that connects you to Him, and why He calls Himself Adonai in the Shema. Most Christian teaching omits His name, but that just wasn't His intention. His name, Adonai, is a reminder of His personal involvement in your life, including the healing of your whole body. You can't love Adonai appropriately or anyone else with a broken heart. That's why He wants to heal all of you, all of your feminine heart, all of your feminine soul, and all of your feminine mind. He's not going to put you back together as a boy or use masculine methods of healing when He created you as a girl. The healing that Jesus came to do is because something's broken or undone or wounded or damaged inside the core of you. Luke 4:18. If you could do it on your own with positive thinking and affirmations and religious works, you wouldn't need a healer. You wouldn't need the personal guidance of the Holy Spirit to walk it with you. As a female, prioritizing time and space for self-care is how you nourish your soul and heal. It doesn't matter what it is. When you hang out with a good friend, it doesn't matter what you're doing together. The point is the intentionality of being together. It's the same with God. It requires intentional space and time to be alone with Him. When I started to understand that because I was a woman, I was able to hold the dichotomy of the external and internal differently than a man. We have the internal capacity that a man doesn't. Masculine thinking tries to turn this dichotomy into an order or a priority that's more like an all or nothing proposition, that it can only be one or the other. But with a healed feminine understanding, the feminine doesn't have an order of what's a priority, because to us, all of it is. We have many parts inside of womanhood. That's what makes us complex. And it's only through healing that all the external and internal become beautifully integrated. The purpose of femininity is to distinguish herself from masculinity, not think like him. That's the meaning of verse 4 in 1 Peter 3. Your femininity is not solely for the benefit of a man. As your husband, he's privileged to cherish and find immense pleasure in all your vibrant and alluring feminine features. which is something wonderful for him. Proverbs 18:22. But this is merely an incidental outcome. The deeper healing and connection you experience is with God. So, as long as you interpret Scripture and your relationship with God through a masculine lens, you will continue to think like a man. You can't think one way and be another. That's why God says to be careful how you think, because your life is shaped by your thoughts. Proverbs 4:23. So, when I was thinking like a man, every time I read 1 Peter 3, verses 3 through 4, the only way I could internalize was in the masculine, right? Because how you think shapes your life. That meant that I was constantly looking for what I was doing wrong and how I could be a better wife. What did I need to strive in more? What did I need to accomplish next? What could it be that I was missing? All these questions are generated from a testosterone-driven mindset. And it's the wrong interpretation for us because it's incomplete without the female understanding. When you're always hunting for what you're doing wrong, you'll never be able to access your feelings. And that's key for women in a one-flesh relationship. It's a vicious cycle that's confusing and frustrating and ultimately damaging for us. I was always decorating the outside as a way to distract myself from the ugliness that I thought was on the inside of my heart. It's not that I didn't sin, but what the Lord wanted me to heal was inside my heart. It was underneath the sin. The internal woman is so much deeper than the external actions. It was the brokenheartedness he wanted me to see. It was how I was thinking, how my thought life had been formed. It doesn't matter how much you do to decorate the outside in order to distract yourself from your heart. You'll never find that healing that the Lord came to do, specifically inside your individual feminine heart, by completing tasks. Thank you for watching until the end. Time is our most important commodity, so thank you for sharing yours in support of this channel. It means a lot to me. If there's a particular part in the video that resonated with you, or if you have something to add to the conversation that would help out the sisterhood, please share it. Every comment, every like, and every share helps get our message out there to more sisters who might need to hear about healing their feminine heart. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.